Maya
Are you
Calloway
safe,
had
little
8
one?
seconds before her foster mother returned from the restroom. 8 seconds to draw what words had failed to communicate for 11 months. 8 seconds to bet her life on a stranger in a Hell's Angels vest who hadn't looked at her once. The broken red crayon moved across the paper placemat. A rectangle, vertical lines inside it. A cage. Below it, 3 block letters in a 9-year-old's careful print. SOS. If this hits you the way it hit me, subscribe, because what happens in the next 5 minutes will prove that sometimes the person who looks the most dangerous is exactly who you need. Drop your city in the comments. Stay with me. Are you safe, little one? Those 5 words, spoken quietly by a man whose beard reached his chest and whose hands could palm a basketball, were the first words any adult had asked Maya Calloway that actually expected a truthful answer. She stared at him. 4 full seconds of silence. Then, barely audible, a whisper that hadn't risen above that volume in 11 months. He locks us in at night. Sunday, August 27th, 2023. 2:19 p.m., Rusty Spur Diner, Old Route 60 West, Amarillo, Texas. The air conditioning rattled in the north window. George Strait played low on the jukebox. The smell of fry grease and old coffee hung thick in the panhandle heat. Maya sat at the outer edge of booth 7, legs already angled toward the door. Both arms pressed flat against her sides beneath the table. Long white thermal sleeves pulled carefully to her wrists, despite the 97-degree afternoon outside. Her pale yellow sundress, 3 sizes too large, safety-pinned at both straps, dragged the floor when she walked. Her white church shoes, 2 sizes too small, cut red rings into her ankles above the patent leather. She weighed 41 pounds. The normal weight for a 9-year-old, her height was 64. She'd been watching the man in booth 8 for 23 minutes. He was enormous. 6'5", easily. Salt and pepper beard to mid-chest. A black leather vest with patches she didn't understand but knew meant something. Wire rim reading glasses perched on his nose as he read a folded newspaper. His hands were the size of dinner plates. Most people crossing the parking lot saw him and chose the other door. But Maya had learned something in her 11 months at the Vance Ranch that most 9-year-olds never have to learn. The adults who smile the warmest are not always the safest, and the ones who look the scariest sometimes have the gentlest hands. She'd been calculating for 3 consecutive Sundays, tracking patterns, memorizing the 5-minute window between when Theodore left the booth to pay at the register and when Evelyn returned from the restroom. Today, for the first time in 3 weeks, the man in the leather vest was in booth 8 when that window opened. Maya's right hand moved beneath the table. Slow. Practiced. The broken red crayon she'd pocketed from the hostess stand on the way in shifted from her left palm to her right fingers. Theodore stood, buttoned his shirt cuff, walked toward the register with his wallet already out, that easy rancher's smile on his face. Evelyn excused herself toward the restroom hallway. "Be right back, sugar." The window was open. Clifford Bear Haynes had registered the child 3 times without appearing to look at her. Once, when she entered. Gait wrong for her age. Too slow. Too careful. The shuffle of someone conserving energy they didn't have. Build wrong for a healthy child. Stick-thin forearms visible when her sleeves shifted. Wrists narrower than the butter knife handle. Long sleeves wrong for a 97-degree Sunday. That particular detail registered in the part of his brain that had spent 22 years as a combat medic and knew what concealment looked like. Once, when her sleeve slipped as she reached for her water glass, a pale, waxy line circled her right wrist. Rope burn. 3 weeks old. The specific width of barn tie-down cord. And once when the woman, Evelyn, Theodore had called her, set a hand on Maya's shoulder, and the child went perfectly still. Not relaxed. Not comforted. The particular frozen stillness of a body that has learned motionlessness is protection. Bear kept reading his newspaper. He had not looked directly at Maya once, but he'd been counting. Untouched food, full plate, nothing moved. Bruise at the right temple, 11 days old. The yellow-green of late-stage healing. A thin scar on her lower lip that had healed without stitches. And those sleeves. On a day when the asphalt outside shimmered in visible heat waves. Something was wrong. He'd been a medic long enough to know that the details your conscious mind hasn't finished cataloging yet are usually the ones that matter most. The paper placemat slid into his peripheral vision. A child's drawing. A rectangle with vertical lines. Crude but unmistakable. A cage. Below it, 3 letters. SOS. Bear set down his newspaper, removed his reading glasses. Picked up the placemat. He looked at Maya for the first time. She was staring straight ahead. Hands back in her lap, as though the action had been taken by a ghost. "Are you safe, little one?" The question was quiet enough that only she could hear it. His voice, despite coming from a man who weighed 287 pounds, had the particular gentleness of someone who'd spent 2 decades asking frightened people questions they needed to answer truthfully. Maya's eyes met his. 4 seconds of silence. Then the whisper. Barely audible. The sound of a child using language like a last resource after every other option has been exhausted. "He locks us in at night." 7 words. But one of them changed everything Bear thought he was dealing with. "Us." "How many?" Bear's voice stayed quiet. Steady. The tone he'd used in field hospitals when he needed information fast, but couldn't afford to spook the source. Maya's left hand moved slowly to her right sleeve. She pulled it up 3 inches. Rope burns on both wrists. Pale. Raised. The waxy texture of skin that had been abraded. Repeatedly by something rough and unforgiving. She didn't look at them. She looked at Bear. "There are 4 others." 5 words. The longest sentence she'd formed in months. And then she reached for the placemat, took the broken crayon back, and turned the paper over. Her hand moved. Careful block letters. The writing of a child who had been practicing this in her head for weeks. Barn. No door open at night. No food today. She set the crayon down. 3 seconds. She looked toward the register. Theodore's back was visible, still at the counter, handing cash to the cashier. Maya turned back to Bear. "I heard him on the phone. He said I'm worth more dead. He said October. He said the same thing about Danny." 22 words. Her most sustained speech in 11 months. The name landed like a stone in water. Danny. Bear's jaw tightened. Not anger. Not yet. The particular tension of a medic who has just been handed information that reframes everything. "Who's Danny?" "The boy before me. He died last year. Theodore got money." Maya's voice was still a whisper, but the words were clear. Factual. The flat delivery of a child reporting something she's overheard and memorized without fully understanding the implications. Bear looked at the placemat. The cage. The rope burns. The hollowed-out face of a 9-year-old who weighed 41 pounds. He looked at the register. Theodore finishing his transaction, pocketing his wallet. He looked at the restroom hallway, Evelyn's reflection not yet visible. He had maybe 90 seconds before this window closed. Bear set the placemat face down on his table and covered it with his hand, securing the evidence, removing it from sight. Maya. He used her name for the first time, made it gentle, made it certain. I am not moving from this seat until you are safe. I'm going to make one phone call. When I do, there will be motorcycles in this parking lot. A lot of them. And not one of them is leaving until all 5 of you are out of that barn. He held out his right hand. Palm up, open, not reaching, not demanding. An offering. That's a medic's word. I don't break those. Maya looked at the hand for 3 seconds. Then she placed her small hand in his. Not a handshake. A hold. The first time she had voluntarily touched an adult in 11 months. What Maya didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that the man whose hand she was holding had spent 14 months fighting to get his granddaughter out of the Texas foster care system. Lily. Born 2019. Placed in emergency custody when Bear's daughter Renee went to court-ordered drug treatment. 14 months of every form, every hearing, every 7 a.m. call to a caseworker's desk that never got returned. Lily came home. But Bear had never stopped thinking about the children who didn't have a grandfather with a Hells Angels road captain's phone number and the refusal to stop calling it. He'd been waiting for this moment for 3 years. He just hadn't known it would be a 9-year-old girl with a broken crayon in a Sunday diner. Bear pulled his phone from his vest pocket, kept his eyes on Theodore at the register, dialed. 1 ring. Reaper. Marcus Dalton's voice. Gravel and diesel. The voice of a man who'd spent 12 years as an army ranger and had learned to speak in the particular economy of someone who'd given orders under fire. Reaper, it's Bear. What's up? Bear glanced at Maya. Her hand was still in his. Small. Cold. Shaking slightly. Child. Abuse. Evidence. I need every brother within 50 miles. Rusty Spur Diner, Old Route 60, now. Silence on the line. Not hesitation. Calculation. How bad? 9 years old, 40 pounds. Rope burns. 5 kids total. Foster placement. Locks them in a barn at night. Previous victim named Danny, who died last year. Possible insurance fraud. Another beat. Then, we're rolling. The line went dead. That was it. No questions about proof, no concerns about legal complications. Just, we're rolling. Because that's what Brotherhood meant. 23 miles east, the Hells Angels Panhandle chapter was in the middle of their regular Sunday afternoon gathering when Reaper walked into the center of the yard and said one sentence. Somebody hurt a kid. We ride. Tank, 6'2", former Amarillo PD homicide detective, 21 years on the force before he retired, stood without a word. Keys already in hand, Steele, the chapter's road captain, 58, gray beard, the kind of face that had been in the vicinity of serious decisions, checked his phone, started texting. Hawk, youngest of the group at 34, tech specialist, the one who handled evidence documentation, grabbed his helmet off the picnic table. Prophet, 72, Vietnam-era combat medic, elder statesman with no formal title and more authority than anyone with one, rose slowly from his chair. Didn't ask where. Didn't ask why. When Prophet moved, everyone else did. Within 11 minutes, 45 motorcycles were on Old Route 60 heading west. The sound started as a low rumble, distant, like thunder on a horizon that hadn't had rain in weeks. Then it grew. Back at the Rusty Spur, Sarah Delgado, the waitress who'd been working the Sunday shift for 9 years, noticed something she'd never seen before. The big guy in booth 8. The one who came every Sunday, ordered the same thing, read his paper, tipped $20 on a $14 tab. He was holding a little girl's hand, and he wasn't letting go. Sarah had passed Maya's booth 3 times in the last hour. Each time, she'd noticed the untouched food, the long sleeves, the way the child sat at the outer edge of the seat like she was ready to run. She'd bent down once, asked gently, "Honey, you want something else? We got peach pie fresh today." Theodore had intercepted before Maya could respond. Smooth, practiced, warm as a summer evening. "She's just shy, picky eater. You know how little girls can be." He'd smiled. Sarah had smiled back. She'd moved on to the next table. That near miss would haunt Sarah Delgado for the rest of the year. Because she'd had the instinct. She'd acted on it. And a man who'd been rehearsing that exact scene for 9 years had managed her in 4 seconds. Theodore Vance turned from the register, pocketed his change, looked toward booth 7. Maya was sitting exactly where he'd left her, hands in her lap, eyes on the table. But the man in booth 8, the one with the beard and the leather vest, wasn't reading his newspaper anymore. He was facing Maya's booth, and his body language had changed. Theodore's smile stayed in place. But something behind his eyes shifted. The particular recalibration of a predator who's just registered a new variable in an environment he thought he controlled. He started walking back toward the booth. Slow, unhurried. A man with nothing to worry about. Evelyn rounded the corner from the restroom hallway. The window was closing. Bear saw them both. Theodore approaching from the left. Evelyn from the right. He didn't stand, didn't move, just kept his hand around Maya's. His other hand moved to his vest pocket, felt for the item he carried every time he rode, a small laminated card, his EMT paramedic certification. Current. Valid. If Theodore asked what he was doing, Bear had an answer that was both true and strategically useful. Child appears to be in medical distress. I'm a licensed paramedic. I'm conducting a welfare assessment. Perfectly legal. Perfectly defensible. Perfectly designed to buy time. Theodore reached the booth. His smile was still there. Confident. The smile of a man who'd talked his way out of 3 CPS investigations and a sheriff's wellness check. Everything all right here? His voice was measured. Polite. The slight Texas drawl that made him sound like a concerned neighbor asking about a borrowed lawnmower. Bear looked up, met his eyes. Your daughter's not feeling well. I'm a paramedic, just making sure she's okay. Not confrontational, not accusatory, just factual. Theodore's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went to Maya's hand, still held in Bear's, and then to Bear's face. Appreciate your concern, but she's fine, just a little shy. Come on, Maya, time to head home. He reached for her shoulder. Bear didn't move his hand from Maya's. She told me she's not feeling safe. As a licensed medical professional, I'm obligated to follow up on that. The temperature in the booth dropped 10 degrees. Theodore's smile finally faded. Just slightly, the mask slipping at the edges. I don't know what she told you, but she told me you lock her in a barn at night. Her and 4 other children. She showed me rope burns on both wrists. She told me about a boy named Danny, who died last year. Bear's voice stayed quiet, but every word landed with the weight of a man who'd decided something and wouldn't be moved. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to step back. I'm going to call the authorities, and Maya is not getting in your truck. Theodore's face changed. The charm fell away like a costume he'd forgotten he was wearing. What replaced it was colder, harder. The face of a man who'd built a 9-year operation on the assumption that no one would ever call him on it. You have no legal authority here. She's my foster child. This is parental interference. Then call the police. Bear's hand stayed on Maya's. His voice stayed level. Let's all wait together. Evelyn had stopped 3 feet from the booth. Her expression, soft, concerned, maternal, had frozen in place. She was reading the room, and what she was reading told her that something had just gone very, very wrong. Outside, the sound arrived before the sight. Low rumble. Growing. Sarah looked up from the service station, toward the windows. The customers at the counter turned. The couple in the window booth stopped mid-conversation. Theodore heard it too. His head turned toward the parking lot, the sound of 45 Harley-Davidson engines at highway speed, growing louder by the second. Not 1 bike, not 5, 45. The specific thunder of organized presence arriving in force. They came in formation. Tight. Disciplined. 4 columns, staggered entry, the kind of synchronized riding that only happens when men have been on the road together for years. The lead bike, a matte black street glide with ape-hanger handlebars, pulled into the parking lot first. The rider was tall, lean, gray beard trimmed close, a scar across his left eyebrow, full-sleeve tattoos visible under his cut. Marcus Reaper Dalton. Behind him, Tank, Steel, Hawk, Prophet. Behind them, 40 more brothers. They parked in perfect rows across the overflow lot. Engines cutting off almost in unison. The sudden silence after all that noise felt heavy, expectant. 45 men in leather vests stood beside their bikes, not moving, not shouting, simply present. Inside the diner, every eye was on the windows. Theodore's face had gone white. Evelyn's hands were shaking. Maya's hand tightened around Bear's fingers. And Sarah Delgado, who'd been carrying the weight of that near miss for the last 20 minutes, felt something break loose in her chest. She walked to booth 8, stood beside Bear. I saw it too, she said quietly. The bruises, the sleeves, the way she didn't eat. I saw it and I didn't do anything, but I'm doing something now. She pulled her phone from her apron, dialed 911. Reaper walked through the diner door first. The screen slapped shut behind him with the particular sound of old hinges that hadn't been oiled in a decade. He didn't look at anyone else. He looked at Bear. Bear gave one small nod. Reaper crossed the diner floor, stopped at booth 7, looked at Theodore. You the foster parent? Theodore's voice, when it came, had lost all its warmth. Who the hell are you? The person who's going to make sure you never see these kids again. Reaper's voice was flat, factual. The voice of a man delivering a weather report he knew to be accurate. Behind him, the door opened again. Tank walked in. Then Steel. Then Hawk. Then Prophet, moving slowly, the the slight limp of a left leg that had taken shrapnel in 1971 and never quite forgiven him for it. The diner was full of leather and chrome and men who'd made a decision 11 minutes ago and had driven 23 miles to make it stick. And that's when Theodore Vance made the last mistake of his free life. He tried to charm his way out. "Look, I don't know what this little girl told you, but she's troubled. She came to us with a lot of damage. These things take time. We're doing the best we—" "Stop!" Prophet's voice. Not loud, not angry, just stop. Theodore stopped. Prophet walked to the booth, looked at Maya. His face, weathered, scarred, the face of a man who'd seen every version of human cruelty the 20th century had to offer, softened in a way that made Sarah's throat tighten. "You're safe now, little one. You and the other 4. We're going to get you out of that barn tonight. And this man," he gestured to Theodore without looking at him, "is never going to touch you again." Maya's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She just whispered, "There's a padlock on the barn door. Evelyn has the key." Prophet nodded. "Then we'll get the key." He looked at Reaper. One glance. No words. Reaper pulled his phone. Dialed. "Chains, it's Reaper. I need you at the Rusty Spur. Bring the lawyer. We're about to have a custody situation." The police arrived 14 minutes later. 2 Potter County Sheriff's cruisers. Lights, but no sirens. Deputy Wade Simmons stepped out of the first vehicle. He was 51. 19 years on the force. Theodore Vance's neighbor since 1997. He looked at the 45 motorcycles, looked at the diner, looked at Reaper standing by the door. His face told the entire story. This was not a situation he'd been prepared to handle. The second cruiser carried Sergeant Linda Orozco. 43. 12 years. No relationship to Theodore Vance. She walked past Simmons, straight to the diner door. Reaper stepped aside. She walked to booth 7. Looked at Maya's wrists, the rope burns still visible where her sleeve had stayed pulled up. Looked at the untouched food. Looked at Theodore. "Sir, I need you to step outside with me." Theodore opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Evelyn. Evelyn was staring at her hands. "I want my lawyer," Theodore said. "That's your right. Step outside." He stood. Slowly. The posture of a man calculating his next move. But when he looked toward the door, at the 45 men standing in the parking lot, arms crossed, watching, the calculation changed. He walked outside. Sergeant Orozco followed. Inside the diner, Bear finally released Maya's hand. Not because he wanted to, because Doc had arrived. William Doc Porter, 50 years old, ex-Army combat medic, certified EMT paramedic for 17 years. He carried a full trauma kit in his right saddlebag and a pediatric assessment checklist he'd memorized the year his niece was in the ICU. He knelt beside the booth, made himself small, made his voice gentle. "Hey, Maya, my name's Doc. I'm a medic, like Bear. I'd like to check you over, make sure you're okay. Is that all right?" Maya looked at Bear. Bear nodded. Maya whispered, "Okay." Doc worked fast, professional, checking pulse, breathing, pupil response. When he pulled a small scale from his kit and asked Maya to step on it, the number that came back made his jaw tighten. 41 pounds. He didn't say anything, just wrote it down. Then he gently rolled up her sleeves. Rope burns on both wrists, a bruise on her upper arm, 4 days old, the shape of an adult handprint. Doc's hands didn't shake, but his voice, when he spoke to Sergeant Orozco, had gone very quiet. "This child is severely malnourished. She needs a hospital. Now." 2:47 p.m. Rusty Spur parking lot. The ambulance arrived 18 minutes after Sergeant Orozco's call. EMTs loaded Maya onto a gurney with practiced efficiency. Doc stayed beside her the entire time, one hand on her shoulder, murmuring reassurances she'd never heard from an adult before. Bear watched from the diner doorway as the ambulance pulled out onto old Route 60, lights flashing but no siren. Maya's face was visible through the rear window, small, pale, looking back at him. He lifted one hand, a promise in that gesture. "I'm not done yet." The ambulance disappeared around the bend. Bear turned back to the parking lot. 45 motorcycles, 45 brothers, all waiting, and Theodore Vance standing beside Sergeant Orozco's cruiser, hands not yet cuffed, face still performing the careful neutrality of a man who believed his lawyer would fix this. Now, you might be thinking, 45 bikers, a predator exposed, and someone's about to get hurt. That's the story you've been trained to expect, isn't it? Leather vests equal violence, motorcycles equal chaos, justice delivered with fists instead of procedure. But what happened next wasn't chaos. It was something the Potter County Sheriff's Department would later describe in their incident report as the most organized civilian intervention in department history. Because these men hadn't come to break the law, they'd come to make sure it finally worked. Reaper walked to the center of the parking lot, raised one hand. Every conversation stopped. "Here's what's happening," he said. His voice carried without being raised. "Tank, you're coordinating with law enforcement. Make sure they have everything they need. Steele, take 6 brothers to the Vance property. Document everything. Photographs, video, timestamps. Do not enter the barn until police arrive. Hawk, you're on evidence preservation. Sarah," he turned to the waitress, who'd followed Bear outside. "We need that placemat sealed, and anything else Maya touched." Tank nodded. Former Amarillo PD knew exactly which sheriff's deputy had federal child welfare reporting obligations that overrode Deputy Simmons's jurisdiction. He pulled his phone, dialed. "Captain Rivera, it's Tank. We've got a situation you need to see." Steele, Road Captain 58, the gray-bearded tactician who planned every chapter ride like a military operation, called 6 names. Diesel, Gunner, Wrench, Hammer, Snake, Flint, with me. 7 motorcycles pulled out in formation, heading west on Old Route 60 toward the Vance property. They rode in disciplined silence, no revving engines, no showboating, just presence. Inside the diner, Sarah Delgado carefully placed the paper placemat inside a gallon-sized freezer bag from the kitchen. The cage, the 3 letters, the evidence of a 9-year-old's last desperate move. Hawk, 34, tech specialist, former NSA signals contractor, documented the scene with his phone. Photographing Maya's untouched plate, the booth she'd sat in. The exact position where Bear had been seated, chain of custody, timestamps, metadata, the kind of evidence that held up in court. 3:14 p.m., Vance Heritage Farm, 17 miles west of Amarillo Steel, and his brothers arrived at the access road. A weathered wooden sign read, "Vance Family Heritage Farms. Organic produce. Visitors welcome." The hypocrisy of that last word made Steele's hands tighten on his handlebars. They parked in a line along the access road, engines off. Steele dismounted, looked at the property. 340 acres. Main farmhouse. White clapboard, front porch. American flag SOS on a pole. A plaque beside the door that read, Potter County Foster Parent of the Year 2021. And behind the farmhouse, 200 feet back, a livestock barn, 60 by 40, faded red paint. One door. A padlock hung from the latch. Steele pulled his phone, started recording. 3:14 p.m. Sunday, August 27th. 7 witnesses present at Vance Family Heritage Farms. We are documenting the exterior of the property prior to law enforcement arrival. We have not entered any structures. We have not touched any evidence. He walked toward the barn. Slow. Deliberate. The camera captured everything. The padlock. Stanley 4-inch hardened steel. The door. No windows. A faint sound from inside. Movement. Small voices. Steele stopped 10 feet from the door. This is Steele. Hell's Angels. Panhandle chapter. There are children inside this structure. We are waiting for law enforcement before entry. If you can hear me, help is coming. You're going to be safe. A pause. Then, from inside the barn, a child's voice. High. Frightened. Hopeful. Is Maya okay? Steele's throat tightened. Maya's safe. She's at the hospital. And in about 20 minutes, you will be too. 3:19 p.m. Rusty Spur parking lot. Sergeant Orozco had called for backup. 2 more cruisers arrived. Then a Potter County CPS supervisor, Marianne Chandler, 46, who'd been with the department for 19 years and had learned to recognize the particular stillness that meant something bad had finally surfaced. She approached Reaper, extended her hand. Marianne Chandler, CPS. I understand there are 5 children involved. Reaper shook her hand. Maya Calloway, 9 years old, currently en route to Amarillo General. 4 more children locked in a barn at the Vance property. My brothers are on site, waiting for police entry. Chandler's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes shifted. Locked in a barn. Padlocked from the outside. Has been for 11 months, according to Maya. Chandler pulled her phone, started typing. Fast. I need the case file on Maya Calloway. Now. She listened. Her face went pale. What do you mean it's flagged stable? Who was the assigned caseworker? A pause. Deborah Holt. The name landed. Reaper watched Chandler's expression harden into something he recognized. A professional realizing they'd been lied to by someone inside their own system. I'll be at the Vance property in 20 minutes. Do not let anyone leave that site. She ended the call, looked at Reaper. If what you're telling me is accurate, someone in my office has been covering for this man. It's accurate, Reaper said. And it's not just your office. Meanwhile, at the edge of the parking lot, a conversation was happening that would change everything. Gerald Patterson, 61, retired postal carrier. The man who'd been seated at counter stool number 3 when Maya's sleeve had slipped. The man who'd seen the rope burn in the mirror and gripped his coffee mug and looked away. He approached Bear, slowly, like a man walking to a confession he'd been avoiding for weeks. I saw it, he said quietly. 3 weeks ago. I was here. She was at that same booth. Her sleeve slipped when she reached for something. I saw the mark on her wrist. I saw it, and I didn't do anything. His hands were shaking. Bear didn't speak. Just let the man continue. I told myself maybe it was an accident. Maybe I was seeing things. Maybe it wasn't my business. Gerald's voice cracked. I could have said something. I could have called someone. And I didn't. Because I didn't want to be wrong. I didn't want to cause trouble. He looked at Bear with eyes that had been carrying this for 21 days. She was at that booth for 3 more Sundays. 3 more chances. And I walked past her every time. Bear's voice, when it came, was quiet. Not absolution. Just truth. You're saying something now. Is it enough? It will be, when you tell the police exactly what you just told me. 3:33 p.m. Vance Heritage Farm. 2. Potter County Sheriff's cruisers pulled onto the property. Sergeant Orozco stepped out of the first. Captain Luis Rivera, 48, 22 years on the force, head of the county's Special Victims Unit, stepped out of the second. Steele walked to meet them. Captain, we've documented the exterior, haven't entered. There are children inside. They're aware we're here. Rivera nodded, looked at the barn, the padlock. Who has the key? Evelyn Vance. She's in custody at the Rusty Spur. Rivera pulled his radio. Orozco, bring Evelyn Vance to the property. I need that padlock key. Now! 15 minutes later, a cruiser pulled up. Evelyn Vance stepped out, hands cuffed behind her back, face blank. Rivera approached her. Mrs. Vance, I need the key to that padlock. Evelyn said nothing. Rivera's voice hardened. You can give me the key, or I'll have bolt cutters here in 10 minutes and you'll watch us cut it off. Your choice. Evelyn's eyes went to the barn, to the 7 men in leather vests standing in a line between her and the door, to the police, the CPS supervisor, the cameras. Her voice, when it came, was barely audible. Front right pocket. An officer retrieved the key. A small brass piece on a red plastic lanyard. Rivera walked to the barn door, inserted the key, turned it. The padlock opened with a click that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. He pulled the door open. Sunlight poured into a space that hadn't seen it in 11 months. 5 metal frame cots along the east wall. 5 children. Ages 6 to 11, blinking against the light. Thin. Pale. Dressed in clothes 3 sizes too large. A boy, maybe 8, with dark hair and eyes too old for his face. A girl, 6, clutching a stuffed rabbit with 1 ear missing. 2 brothers, 10 and 11, holding hands. And standing at the front, the one who'd spoken earlier. A girl, 10, with red hair and a scar on her chin. She looked at Rivera, then at Steele. You said Maya's safe? Steele's voice was gentle. She's safe. And now you are too. The girl's knees buckled. She didn't fall. Steele caught her, knelt down to her level. What's your name? Alicia. Alicia, I'm Steele. These are my brothers. We're going to make sure nothing bad happens to you ever again. Can you tell me the names of the others? She pointed. That's Elias. That's Sophie. That's Marcus and David. They're twins. Doc appeared in the doorway, trauma kit in hand. He assessed each child. Fast. Professional. Writing down weights, visible injuries, hydration levels. The numbers made his jaw lock. Elias, 39 pounds. Age 8. Expected weight, 57. Sophie, 31 pounds. Age 6. Expected weight 46. Marcus and David, 44 and 43 pounds. Age 10 and 11. Expected weights 68 and 71. Alicia, 48 pounds. Age 10. Expected weight 66. 5 children. Collective weight deficit 107 pounds. Doc looked at Captain Rivera. They all need hospitalization, severe malnutrition, possible dehydration. I'm seeing signs of vitamin deficiency in at least 3 of them. Rivera's radio crackled. Rivera, this is dispatch. We have 3 ambulances en route. ETA 6 minutes. Copy. Rivera looked at the children, at the barn, at the single 40-watt bulb hanging from the ceiling, at the laminated chore schedule posted beside the door, structured to occupy children from 4:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m., at the leather crop hanging from a peg. He'd been a cop for 22 years. He'd seen child abuse cases that had made him go home and hold his own kids tighter. But this was different. This was systematic, industrial, an operation. 3:52 p.m. Rusty Spur parking lot. Theodore Vance sat in the back of Sergeant Orozco's cruiser, hands cuffed, face neutral. He'd asked for his lawyer twice, been told his lawyer was on the way. He was humming, quietly, a hymn. Amazing Grace. As if this were an inconvenience, a misunderstanding, something that would blow over once the right people made the right phone calls. Tank stood outside the cruiser, watching him through the window. The humming made his skin crawl, because this was the thing people didn't understand about predators. They didn't look like monsters. They looked like deacons, foster parents, award recipients. They hummed hymns while waiting for their lawyer. 4:08 p.m. Potter County Sheriff's Department, Interview Room 2. Evelyn Vance sat across from Sergeant Orozco and Captain Rivera. She'd declined a lawyer, said she wanted to clear this up. Orozco started the recording. Mrs. Vance, can you explain the padlock on the barn door? Evelyn's hands were folded on the table. Calm. Practiced. Safety. The children sometimes wander at night. We lock the barn to keep them from getting hurt on the property. For their safety. Yes. Rivera leaned forward. Mrs. Vance, those children were locked in that barn from 8 p.m. to 4:30 a.m. every night for 11 months. No bathroom access, no water, no adult supervision. That's not safety. That's imprisonment. Evelyn's expression didn't change. These children came from difficult backgrounds. They need structure, discipline. Theodore and I provide that. Is rope burns part of the discipline? A flicker. Brief. Behind her eyes. I don't know what you're referring to. Rivera slid a photograph across the table. Maya's wrists. The rope burns. Pale. Raised. Unmistakable. Maya Calloway's wrists, consistent with being restrained, repeatedly, for extended periods. Evelyn looked at the photograph. Said nothing. Rivera slid another photograph. The barn's interior, the cots, the chore schedule, the crop. This is where you kept 5 children. For 11 months. Still nothing. Rivera's voice dropped. Quiet. Dangerous. We found Theodore's calendar. October 14th is circled, with a notation, M, no contest period, expired. Want to explain that? Evelyn's hands tightened, just slightly. I don't know anything about Theodore's calendar. We also found a life insurance policy, $378,000, on Maya Calloway. Theodore is the beneficiary. The policy was taken out 8 months ago. The contestability period expires October 14th. Evelyn's face went white. Rivera continued. That's the same month Maya's health declined. The same month you reduced her food rations. The same month she dropped to 41 pounds. Silence. Then, quietly, Evelyn said, I want a lawyer. 4:23 p.m. Potter County Sheriff's Department. Evidence processing Hawk was uploading the barn footage to a secure server when he noticed something on the memory card from Theodore's seized phone. A text thread, partially deleted. But the phone's backup cache had preserved fragments. He called Tank over. Look at this. The screen showed a conversation between Theodore and an unsaved number, dated 9 days ago. Theodore. Still on schedule. October works. Unknown. Policy clear? Theodore. 378. Same process as before. Unknown. Pruitt squared away? Theodore. Handled. Tank's jaw tightened. Who's Pruitt? Hawk ran the name through the county database. Eldon Pruitt, senior pastor, First Baptist Church of Canyon. Theodore's been a deacon there for 10 years. Tank's phone was already out, dialing. Captain Rivera, we've got something. 4:47 p.m. Hell's Angels Clubhouse. Panhandle. Chapter. The chapter had reconvened. Not at the diner. At the clubhouse, a converted warehouse on the industrial edge of Amarillo, with a parking lot that could fit 200 bikes and a meeting room that had seen every kind of serious conversation leather-clad men could have. Reaper stood at the head of the table. Around him, Tank, Steele, Bear, Doc, Hawk, Prophet. And on the laptop screen, evidence. Hawk narrated. Theodore's phone. Deleted texts, partially recovered. References to the policy. That's the $378,000 life insurance on Maya. References to same process as before. And here's the kicker. A name. Danny Reyes. Bear leaned forward. Maya mentioned Danny. Said he died last year. Said Theodore got money. Hawk pulled up a death certificate, filed October 18th, 2021. Daniel Reyes. Age 6. Cause of death. Cardiac arrest secondary to severe dehydration and pneumonia. Ruled natural causes. Hawk clicked to the next document. A life insurance policy. Lone Star Mutual Life Insurance. Policy on Daniel Reyes. Beneficiary. Theodore A. Vance. Payout. $156,000. Policy taken out. February 3rd, 2021. 7 weeks after Danny's placement with the Vances. Danny's death. October 18th, 2021. 9 weeks after the policy's contestability period expired. The room went silent. Prophet's voice cut through. He's done this before. Tank pulled another file. Danny's aunt, Rosa Reyes, filed a formal inquiry with State DFPS in November 2021. Requested re-examination of the death. The case was referred to Judge Boyd Rafferty, Family Court. And Rafferty sealed the case within 48 hours, cited protection of minor privacy. Rosa received a cease and desist letter from an Amarillo attorney 2 weeks later. The inquiry was closed. Danny's file is still sealed. Hawk pulled up a calendar. Judge Rafferty and Theodore Vance have served on the Amarillo Area Food Bank Board together since 2019. They attend the same Rotary Club. Rafferty presided over 4 placement continuation hearings for the Vances over 9 years. Average court time per hearing, 11 minutes. Steele's hands were flat on the table. This isn't one predator. This is infrastructure. Reaper looked at each man in turn. How deep does this go? 5:14 p.m. First Baptist Church of Canyon, pastor's office Tank and Chains, the former homicide detective, and the current chapter's legal specialist, arrived unannounced. Pastor Eldon Pruitt, 64, silver-haired, wearing a polo shirt and khakis, answered the door with a warm smile. Gentlemen, how can I help you? Tank didn't smile back. We'd like to talk about Theodore Vance. The warmth flickered, just for a second. Theodore, yes, terrible situation. I've been praying for clarity. Chains pulled a folder from his jacket. We found a text thread on Theodore's phone. Your name came up. Pruitt squared away. Want to explain that? Pruitt's smile faded. I don't know what you're referring to. 3 months ago, Maya Calloway placed a note in your church collection basket. It read, "Please help us, we live on the farm." You found it. You called Theodore. Want to tell us what happened next? Pruitt's face lost color. She was a troubled child. Theodore explained that she had behavioral issues, that she was acting out. So you destroyed the note. Silence. And you provided written character references for Theodore in 3 separate CPS placement renewals. Theodore is a man of faith, a respected member of this congregation. I had no reason to. A 9-year-old girl asked you for help, Tank said quietly. You called the man she was asking to be saved from, and then you vouched for him. 3 times. Pruitt's hands were shaking. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. You didn't want to know, Chains corrected. Because knowing would have required you to do something. And doing something would have meant admitting you'd been wrong about Theodore for 10 years. Pruitt sank into his chair. What happens now? Now you tell us everything. Every character reference, every conversation, every time you chose Theodore's reputation over a child's safety. And then you pray the prosecutor sees cooperation as a mitigating factor. 5:52 p.m. FBI Field Office. Lubbock, Texas. Special Agent Nicole Brennan had been working a multi-state foster care fraud case for 18 months. She'd built a financial trail connecting 3 separate placement operations. Insurance fraud, federal benefits fraud, DFPS documentation fraud. But she'd hit a wall. No witnesses, no victims willing to testify. No hard evidence linking the financial patterns to specific abuse. Then her phone rang. Agent Brennan, this is Marcus Dalton. I'm calling from Amarillo. We have something relevant to your investigation. Who is we? Hell's Angels, Panhandle chapter. We just pulled 5 children out of a barn. The placement operator has a deleted text thread mentioning a policy, a previous victim, and a name you might recognize, Judge Boyd Rafferty. Brennan sat up. How soon can you be in Amarillo? I'm 3 hours out, but if what you've found connects to what I've been building, you might have just closed my case. 6:11 p.m. Hell's Angels Clubhouse. Agent Brennan arrived in an unmarked sedan. Alone. No performance of authority. Just a woman in practical clothes carrying a laptop case, and the exhausted look of someone who'd been chasing this for longer than she wanted to admit. Reaper met her at the door. Agent Brennan, Marcus Dalton. They shook hands. I'm told you have evidence. We do. But first, how long has your office known about Theodore Vance? The question landed, uncomfortable. Brennan's expression didn't change, but something in her shoulders shifted. We flagged his financial patterns 6 months ago. Life insurance policies on foster children, repeated placements with no reunification or adoption. We've been building the case legally, carefully, by the book. How many children were in that barn while you built your case? The room was silent. Brennan had no good answer. She didn't try to give one. We got Maya out in 5 hours. You had 6 months. Reaper's voice wasn't angry, just factual. Brennan met his eyes. You're right. And if I could go back and move faster, I would. But I can't. What I can do is make sure Theodore Vance and everyone who enabled him never do this again. Reaper studied her, then nodded. Show her what we found. Hawk laid out the evidence. Theodore's phone, the deleted texts, the insurance policies, the calendar notation. Brennan reviewed each item. Her expression shifted. She set down her pen, leaned forward. This fills a gap we haven't been able to close for 18 months. We had the financial trail. We didn't have the direct evidence linking Theodore to premeditation. Chains, the retired judge, spoke. What do you need from us? Full cooperation. Witness statements. Chain of custody documentation for everything you've collected. And one condition from you. What do you want in return? Reaper's answer was immediate. Maya gets a victim advocate assigned before her first interview. Same for the other 4. Nobody talks to them without them asking first. Brennan nodded. Done. She stood, extended her hand. We'll be in touch within 24 hours. After she left, Prophet looked at Reaper. You trust her? I trust that she needs this case as much as we need justice. That's enough. 6:44 p.m. Hell's Angels Clubhouse, War Room. All the evidence was assembled, laid out on the table like a map of systemic failure. The full scope: victims, Maya Calloway, 9, Alicia Foster, 10 Elias Monroe, 8 Sophie Chandler, 6 Marcus and David Patterson, 10 and 11 Danny Reyes, 6 deceased October 2021. Total 7 children, 6 living, 1 dead. Financial trail: life insurance policy on Maya, $378,000. Life insurance payout on Danny, $156,000. Foster care stipends, $14,235 per month, times 11 months equals $156,585. Total extracted, $690,585 over 22 months. Frivolous spending identified, $141,000. Boat, gambling, property down payment. Timeline of operation: Danny Reyes placement, January 2021. Danny's policy taken out, February 2021. 7 weeks post-placement. Danny's death, October 2021. 9 weeks after contestability period. Maya's placement, September 2022. Maya's policy taken out, November 2022. 8 weeks post-placement. Planned October. 2023, 11 months later, week after Maya's contestability period. The network: Theodore Vance, primary predator, financial architect; Evelyn Vance, operational manager; food rationing, barn maintenance, documentation; caseworker; Deborah Holt, filed Maya's rope burns as self-harm, Accepted gift card at Christmas. Closed 3 investigations without escalation. Judge Boyd Rafferty. Sealed Danny Reyes case file. Processed 4. Vance placement continuations in 11 minutes total court time. Board member with Theodore. Deputy Wade Simmons. Filed and closed 2 anonymous complaints. Never exited vehicle for wellness checks. Theodore's neighbor since 1997. Pastor Eldon Pruitt. Found Maya's help note. Called Theodore. Destroyed note. Provided 3 character references for CPS renewals. Charges to be filed. Child endangerment, 6 counts. Felony, child abuse, 6 counts. Imprisonment of a minor, 5 counts. Insurance fraud, 2 counts. Conspiracy to commit murder, 1 count. Maya. Negligent homicide, 1 count. Danny Reyes, pending investigation. Federal benefits fraud, ongoing. Obstruction of justice, pending co-conspirator charges. Reaper looked at the assembled evidence. 7 children. 1 dead. A system that had looked the other way for 22 months. And a network that had been built, brick by brick, with handshakes and donations, and a plaque on a farmhouse wall. This wasn't just Theodore, he said quietly. This was everyone who made Theodore possible. 7:18 p.m. Amarillo General Hospital, Pediatric Wing. Maya lay in a hospital bed for the first time in 11 months that wasn't a metal cot in a barn. Clean sheets, soft pillow, an IV line in her left arm delivering fluids her body had been crying for since March. Bear sat in the chair beside her bed. He'd been there for 2 hours. Hadn't left. Doc had completed the full medical assessment an hour ago. The results were being compiled into a report that would become evidence. But right now they were just numbers that made every medical professional in the building want to break something. Maya Calloway, age 9. Weight, 41 pounds, 23 pounds below expected. Blood pressure, 88/52, dangerously low. Heart rate, 104, elevated, consistent with malnutrition stress. Hemoglobin, 9.2 grams per deciliter, severe anemia. Vitamin D, undetectable signs of refeeding syndrome. Risk, high. Recommended treatment, supervised nutrition protocol, 4 to 6 weeks inpatient minimum. The pediatric nutritionist, Dr. Sarah Kim, had been gentle when she explained to Maya that she couldn't eat everything she wanted right away, that her body needed to remember how to process food slowly. Maya had nodded, said nothing, because slow was a concept she understood. She'd been starving slowly for 11 months. Bear watched her sleep, the rise and fall of her chest, the IV drip, the hospital bracelet on her too thin wrist. His phone buzzed. Text from Reaper. All 5 kids stable. Hospital keeping them 72 hours minimum. CPS has emergency custody. Vance's denied bail. FBI taking over case. You did good, brother, Bear typed back 1 word. Maya? She asked for you. Nurse said you haven't left. Bear looked at the sleeping child. Her hand had found his at some point in the last hour. Small fingers wrapped around his thumb. He wasn't leaving. Day 3, Tuesday, August 29th, 2023. Potter County Courthouse. Emergency custody hearing Judge Patricia Hammond presided. 62 years on the bench. 28 years in family court. She'd seen every version of human failure the system could produce. This one made her want to retire. The evidence was presented by Assistant District Attorney Michael Torres. 39. 7 years prosecuting child welfare cases. This was the worst he'd ever seen. Photographs of the barn, the padlock, the chore schedule, the crop. Medical reports on all 6 children. Collective weight deficit, 130 pounds. Theodore's calendar. The insurance policies. The deleted texts. Danny Reyes's death certificate, and the sealed case file that Judge Rafferty had buried. When Torres finished, Judge Hammond removed her glasses. Emergency custody is granted to the state. Theodore and Evelyn Vance are prohibited from any contact with the minor children. Bail is denied pending psychiatric evaluation and flight risk assessment. She looked at Theodore, seated at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit. Mr. Vance, I have been on this bench for 28 years. I have seen neglect. I have seen cruelty. What you did to these children was industrial. You built a machine designed to extract money from human suffering. And when one child stopped being profitable, you planned to replace them with the next. Theodore's lawyer started to object. Hammond raised one hand. Save it for trial. This hearing is concluded. The gavel fell. Day 7, Monday, September 4th, 2023. Scene 1. The medical visit. Doc sat in the waiting room of Amarillo General's Pediatric Clinic, 4th floor, East Wing. He'd brought Maya here for her first post-discharge appointment. She sat beside him, wearing new clothes, jeans that fit, a purple t-shirt with a cartoon cat on it, shoes that didn't cut her ankles, clothes that Steele's wife had bought. Sizes checked 3 times to make sure they actually fit a 9-year-old. Maya had stared at them for a full minute before putting them on, like she was waiting for someone to tell her it was a mistake. Doc had a granola bar in his vest pocket. Not for him. For Maya. Because he'd learned that having food available, visible, accessible, no asking required, helped. The nurse called her name. Maya Calloway? Maya stood, looked at Doc. You want me to come with you? She nodded. They walked together into the examination room. Dr. Kim reviewed the charts. 2 weeks of supervised nutrition. Weight gain, 3.2 pounds. Slow, careful. Exactly what refeeding protocol called for. Hemoglobin improving. Vitamin D supplementation showing results. She looked at Maya, smiled. You're doing great, Maya. Your body is healing. Keep eating like we talked about, small amounts, often, and in a few more weeks, we'll add more variety. Maya whispered, Can I have strawberries? Dr. Kim's smile widened. Strawberries are perfect. I'll add them to your list. After the appointment, Dr. Kim pulled Doc aside in the hallway. Thank you, she said quietly, for getting her here when you did. Another month, and we would have been looking at organ failure. Doc's jaw tightened. She's safe now. That's what matters. Dr. Kim handed him a folder. Her care plan. Next appointment in 2 weeks. And Doc? Tell your brothers we don't usually say this to civilians, but thank you. All of you. Day 14, Monday, September 11th, 2023. Scene 2. The first safe meal. The Hells Angels clubhouse had been converted for the evening into something it had never been before. A family dinner space. Long tables, paper plates, plastic forks, and food. So much food. Not from a restaurant, from the brothers' kitchens. Homemade. Steele's wife had made lasagna. Tank's partner brought cornbread. Hawk's mom, a tiny woman in her 70s who treated every biker like an overgrown grandson, had baked 3 pies. Maya sat between Bear and Prophet. Alicia beside her. The twins, Marcus and David, across the table. Elias and Sophie at the end, flanked by Doc and Chains. 6 children, 17 brothers, 3 wives, 2 girlfriends, Hawk's mom, a family that hadn't existed 3 weeks ago. Maya stared at her plate. Lasagna, garlic bread, green beans, more food than she'd seen on a plate in 11 months. She picked up her fork. Set it down. Looked at Bear. Can I really eat all of this? Bear's voice was gentle. You can eat as much or as little as you want. And if you want more, there's more. And if you want to save some for later, we'll wrap it up for you. Nobody's taking your plate away. Not now, not ever. Maya's hand shook slightly as she picked up the fork again. She took 1 bite, chewed slowly. The room had gone quiet. Not watching her, just present. She took another bite. And then, for the first time in 11 months, Maya Calloway ate a full meal without counting the minutes until someone took it away. Afterward, Hawk's mom brought out the pies. Peach, apple, cherry. Maya chose peach. The smell, sweet, cinnamon, warm crust, was the same smell that had been in the Rusty Spur diner 3 weeks ago. The smell of safety she hadn't recognized yet. Now she did. Day 21. Monday, September 18th, 2023. Scene 3. The Housing Solution. CPS had placed all 6 children in emergency foster care. But not together. That lasted 4 days before Marianne Chandler called Reaper. The kids are asking for each other. They've been through trauma together. Separating them is re-traumatizing them. So keep them together. Potter County doesn't have a facility that can house 6 children in one placement. The group homes are full, and standard foster placements max out at 2, maybe 3 kids. Reaper was quiet for 3 seconds. What if we found a place? 1247. Oakwood Lane, Amarillo, Texas. The house had belonged to a brother named Flint. Passed away 2 years ago. Cancer. His widow, Denise, had kept it, but couldn't bring herself to live there alone. When Reaper called her, she didn't hesitate. Bring them home. The chapter spent a week getting it ready. New beds, fresh paint. A refrigerator stocked with food labeled with each child's name so they'd know it was theirs. A pantry with a lock that didn't work, deliberately broken, so the kids could see there was food but understand they'd never be locked away from it again. On September 18th, a CPS van pulled up. 6 children stepped out. Marianne Chandler walked them to the door. Denise opened it. "Welcome home," she said. Maya stood in the doorway, looked at the living room. The couch, the TV, the bookshelf. She looked at Denise. "Is this ours?" "It's yours, all of you, for as long as you need it." Maya walked inside slowly, touched the couch, like she was testing whether it was real. Alicia followed, then the twins, then Elias and Sophie. Marianne handed Denise a folder. "Emergency placement paperwork. You're approved for 6 months, renewable. The chapter's fundraising covered the first year's expenses. Therapy appointments start next week. School enrollment is Friday." She paused. Denise, I've been doing this job for 19 years. I have never seen a community show up for children the way your club has shown up for these 6. Thank you. Denise's eyes were wet. They're family now. That's what family does. Day 28. Monday, September 25th, 2023. Scene 4. The brothers saying goodbye. Not goodbye forever. Goodbye to the emergency phase. The crisis was over. The kids were safe, housed, fed, enrolled in school, therapy scheduled, medical care ongoing. The chapter gathered one last time at the Oakwood house. Not a meeting, a transition. Tank knelt in front of Elias, the 8-year-old who'd stopped talking after the first week in the barn. Elias, you've got my number. You need anything? Help with homework? Someone to talk to? Anything. You call me, day or night, understand? Elias nodded. Then quietly, thank you. First words he'd spoken in 3 weeks. Hawk sat with Alicia at the kitchen table, showed her his phone. This app is for you. It's got my number, Bear's number, Reaper's number, all the brothers. You tap this button, it sends us all a message at once. You feel scared, you feel unsafe, you feel anything. You tap it. We come. Always. Alicia took the phone, looked at the screen. What if it's not an emergency? What if I just want to talk? Then you tap it anyway. There's no such thing as bothering us. Bear stood on the porch with Maya. The sun was setting, orange and pink across the panhandle sky. You're going to be okay, he said quietly. You and the others. You're going to have nightmares. You're going to have hard days. But you're going to heal. Because you're not in that barn anymore. And you never will be again. Maya looked up at him. Will you come back? I'll come back, every Sunday. Same as the diner, except now I'm coming here. She reached for his hand. He gave it to her. Bear? Yeah, little one? I'm glad I gave you the paper. His throat tightened. Me too. Prophet was the last to leave. He stood in the doorway, looking at the 6 children gathered in the living room. Sophie was curled up on the couch with her one-eared rabbit. The twins were playing cards at the coffee table. Elias was reading a book Chains had given him. Alicia was helping Maya set the table for dinner. Normal. Safe. Ordinary. Prophet had been riding with the Hells Angels for 46 years. He'd seen every version of good and evil the highways could produce. These 6 kids, this house, this moment, was what it was all for. He looked at Denise. You call if you need anything. I will. He walked to his bike, straddled it, started the engine. And as he pulled out onto Oakwood Lane, he thought about Danny Reyes, the 6-year-old who didn't make it, the one they didn't get to in time. This one's for you, kid. Bear didn't plan to be at the Oakwood house on the night of October 14th. But when the date circled on Theodore's calendar finally arrived, he found himself standing in Denise's driveway at 9:43 p.m., unable to stay away. The date Theodore had planned for Maya to die. Through the window, Bear could see the living room. Maya was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching a movie with Alicia, eating popcorn from a bowl in her lap. Alive. Safe. 44 pounds now. 3 pounds heavier than the day he'd met her. Still too thin. Still healing. But healing. Bear stood there for a long time. The river of headlights on the distant highway, the cicadas in the trees, the warm September night that would have been Maya's last if a broken red crayon and 5 available minutes had fallen differently. He thought about Gerald Patterson, the man at the diner who'd seen the rope burn 3 weeks before Bear did, and chosen silence. He thought about the teacher who'd noticed Maya's weight loss and accepted Theodore's explanation. He thought about Deputy Simmons, who'd driven to the access road and never exited his vehicle. He thought about every person who'd had a chance to act and chosen the comfort of looking away. And then he thought about Sarah, the waitress who'd sealed the placemat in a freezer bag, who'd testified at the preliminary hearing with hands that shook, but a voice that didn't. He thought about Gerald, who'd walked into the sheriff's department 3 days after the rescue and confessed everything he'd seen and failed to do. He thought about the difference between them. Not intelligence, not courage, not resources. Just a choice. The choice to let it mean what it meant. Bear pulled a small piece of paper from his vest pocket. A note Maya had written yesterday in art therapy and given to him before he left. Thank you for not walking away. 7 words in careful 9-year-old handwriting. He folded it, put it back in his pocket. Started his bike. He didn't look back at the house. He knew Maya was safe. That was enough. Maya stood in the hallway of Oakwood Elementary School, staring at a bulletin board. Student Council elections. Vote November 15th. Her name was on the ballot. 5th grade representative. She hadn't planned to run, hadn't even considered it. But her teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, had pulled her aside 3 weeks ago and said something that had stayed with her. You have a story that matters, Maya. And when you're ready to tell it, people will listen. Maya hadn't told her story yet. Not publicly, but running for student council felt like a first step toward something. Toward believing that her voice, the one that had been silent for 11 months, was worth hearing. She'd won the election yesterday. 43 votes. Now she stood in front of the bulletin board, looking at her name under the heading, Your New Student Council. Alicia walked up beside her, grinned. Told you you'd win. Maya smiled. Small. Real. I didn't think anyone would vote for me. Why not? You're the kid who took down a predator with a crayon. That's the most badass thing anyone at this school has ever done. Maya laughed. Actually laughed. It was the first time Alicia had heard that sound in 14 months. That same week, the Panhandle chapter gathered for their annual fundraiser. The goal? Raise money for a new initiative. Angel's Watch, a Hell's Angels foster care monitoring program. The idea was simple. Volunteer brothers, vetted and trained, conducting informal wellness checks on foster placements. Not replacing CPS, not circumventing the system. Just adding an additional layer of eyes that couldn't be managed or charmed or filed away. Reaper stood at the podium, explaining the program to a room full of brothers from 4 surrounding chapters. We can't save every kid, but we can make it harder for the next Theodore Vance to operate in silence. We can be the person who doesn't look away. By the end of the night, the chapter had raised $19,200. 3 other Texas chapters voted to adopt the model. Within a year, Angel's Watch would be operating in 11 counties. Maya Calloway was 12 years old when she walked into the Rusty Spur diner for the first time since the day she'd slid a placemat across 4 feet of linoleum and bet her life on a stranger. She was with Denise, Weekly lunch tradition, every Sunday after church. Sarah was still the waitress. She looked up when they walked in. Recognized Maya instantly. Her eyes filled. "Hey, sweetheart." "Hi, Sarah." They sat in booth 7. The same booth. Maya ordered a cheeseburger, fries, peach pie for dessert. She ate every bite. Afterward, Sarah brought the check. Set it down. Hesitated. "Maya, there's something I need to tell you. I've been carrying it for 3 years." Maya looked up. "I saw you that day, before Bear did. I saw the long sleeves. I saw that you weren't eating. I asked if you wanted something else, and Theodore answered for you. And I let him." Sarah's voice cracked. "I could have done more. I could have pushed. I could have called someone right then. But I didn't. I walked away. And I am so sorry." Maya was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table, took Sarah's hand. "You called 911. You gave them the placemat. You testified. You did more than most people ever do. But I should have—" "You did enough," Maya said quietly. "You were the second person who helped save my life. The first was Bear. The second was you." Sarah cried. Right there at the table. And Maya, who had learned slowly over 3 years of therapy and safety and people who stayed, understood that forgiveness wasn't about erasing what happened. It was about recognizing that most people aren't villains or heroes. They're just people. And sometimes people get a second chance to choose better. 1 month later, Maya was invited to speak at a Potter County CPS training session. She was 12. She'd never spoken publicly about what happened. But when Marianne Chandler asked, Maya said yes. She stood in front of 47 caseworkers, social workers, foster care coordinators, people who held children's lives in manila folders and 30-minute home visits. She told them about the barn, the padlock, the rope burns. She told them about the 3 people who'd tried to help before Bear and how the system had failed to hear them. She told them about Deborah Holt, the caseworker who'd documented her rope burns as self-harm and closed the case in 48 hours. And then she said something that would be quoted in CPS training materials for the next decade. "You have the power to save lives or to file paperwork. And sometimes those feel like the same thing, but they're not. The difference is whether you believe the child in front of you or the adult who's had more time to practice their story." Silence. Then one caseworker in the back row stood, started clapping, then another, then all 47. Bear still went to the Rusty Spur every Sunday. Same booth, same order, black coffee, chicken fried steak, peach pie to go. But now every time he sat down, his eyes went to the small frame beside the register. A paper placemat, a red crayon cage, 3 letters, SOS. Sarah had framed it 6 months after the trial. No placard, no explanation. The regulars knew. New customers sometimes asked. Sarah always answered the same way. "A little girl left it here. She's okay now." Bear stared at it for a long time today. 3 years since that Sunday. 3 years since a 9-year-old's last desperate move had landed in exactly the right place. His phone buzzed. Text from Maya. "Movie night at the house tonight. You coming?" He smiled. Typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." He paid his tab, left a 20 on a $14 check, same as always. Walked to his bike. And as he pulled out onto Old Route 60, heading toward Oakwood Lane, he thought about something Prophet had said once. You don't measure a life by the mistakes you didn't make. You measure it by the moments you chose to show up when it would have been easier to look away. Bear had spent 22 years as a medic. He'd saved 31 lives under fire, evacuated casualties, earned medals. But the moment he was proudest of, the moment he'd looked at a placemat and listened to a whisper, that was the one that mattered. Here's what stays with me about Maya's story. Not the barn, not the padlock, not even the rescue. It's the calculation. A 9-year-old child performing risk analysis every time an adult moved too fast in her direction, tracking a 5-minute window across 3 consecutive Sundays, practicing what to draw so it fit in 8 seconds and 3 letters. Children do not think that way by nature. We teach them to think that way when we build a world in which that skill becomes necessary for survival. That is not Maya's failure. That belongs to every adult who looked at the information in front of them and chose the interpretation that cost them the least. If you see a child wearing long sleeves in August heat, that is not a quirky preference. That is concealment. Rope burns, bruises in the shape of hands, fading marks near the hairline. These do not happen from playing. If your instinct says something is wrong with a child, your instinct is running off details your conscious mind hasn't finished cataloging yet. Trust it before you talk yourself out of it. You are not being dramatic. You are being accurate. You do not need a leather vest or a badge or a clinical license to act. You need a phone and the willingness to be wrong. The National Child Abuse Hotline is 1-800-422-4453. You do not need evidence to call. You need concern. That is the entire threshold. The call takes 3 minutes. The silence, as this story proves, costs years. Sometimes it costs everything. The foster care system failed Maya not because of one corrupt actor, but because Theodore Vance had learned over 9 years exactly how the system processes information. The 20-minute welfare visit. The paperwork notation that converts evidence of abuse into evidence of prior damage. The judge who seals a file as a professional courtesy. The deputy who does not exit his vehicle. If you work anywhere in that system, as a caseworker, a judge, a school administrator, a family physician, the question is not whether you are being deceived. The question is whether you have built conditions that make deception too easy. Scheduled visits are an invitation. Surprise ones are a reality check. A waitress named Sarah noticed an untouched plate. A biker named Bear counted the details and let a child's silence mean exactly what silence means. Neither of them had authority. Neither of them had a mandate. Both of them had presence. The decision to remain in the moment with what was actually in front of them, rather than the comfortable interpretation. This story is proof that the difference between a child who gets out and one who doesn't is often one adult who refused to decide it wasn't their business. You have lived long enough to know that respectability is not the same as character. That the man with the award on his wall and the warm handshake can be an entirely different person when the door closes. Your generation built neighborhoods where everyone watched out for everyone's children. That was not sentiment. That was infrastructure. It was the most effective child protection system ever designed. And it worked because it was distributed, because it didn't require a badge or a form or a scheduled visit. It required neighbors. It required people who were paying attention. The children in this story needed that infrastructure. They found it, in the end, in a diner parking lot. It arrived at 45 Harleys loud enough to hear from 2 miles away. It was enough. This time. The next time you see a child who is very, very quiet in a way that doesn't feel like shyness, in a diner, a parking lot, a church lobby, a grocery store, ask yourself one question. Is this child being still because they are content? Or because they have learned that being still is safer than being noticed? If this story moved you, subscribe to Valiant Bikers and share it. Tell someone you love that you're paying attention now, that you won't be the person who looks away. And comment below, who was the person who saw you when you needed to be seen? Or what do you wish someone had done? Tell me your story, because every story matters. Every voice matters. Every child deserves at least one adult who refuses to look away. A 9-year-old girl sat in booth 7 of a roadside diner, holding a broken red crayon. 8 seconds from a stranger who would either save her life or ignore her. 3 years later, that same girl stood in front of a room full of caseworkers and told them the truth that would change how they saw every child who crossed their desk. Believe the child in front of you, not the adult who's had more time to practice their story. The difference between those 2 moments, between the silent girl with the crayon and the advocate with the microphone, was one person who looked at a paper placemat and decided it meant exactly what it said. SOS. A call for help. Not ignored, not filed away, not explained, answered.